So hey anime fan, the series name is What If Naruto Was in Kung Fu Panda and Harem. So let's start the series. In the small port town of Basin Ridge, the only settlement on the Basin River and the only known passage between China and Japan, Naruto, the main character of our story, steps out of the last boat that has just arrived. In addition to his burnt orange fur, he has a black line around his muzzle and black points on his hands, feet, and ears. With the exception of its white tip, his tail is the same color as the rest of him. In addition, he has white fur that separates into 3 white whiskers as it reaches from the base of his nose to his cheeks. The bandages surrounding his lower leg were visible, and his black combat pants were ripped at the very bottom. Bandages were placed across his abdominal muscles, and an open black vest and bandages covered his chest. The vest was modified to conceal the ripped threads and at one stage looked like a formal shirt with the sleeves removed. He lifts his head to look at the height and position of the sun, revealing his beautiful amber eyes and the 3 white stripes of fur on each cheek. Although not everyone would be aware of his fighting skills, anyone could see that he was a fighter because of his skinny and flexible figure. So where are these legendary warriors at? Where is the Furious Five? The Furious Five, why do you ask? A female goat was staring at Naruto when he turned around. The goat was instantly appalled by the woman, not because he is ill or anything, but of the extremely green mole on his nose. Furthermore, this particular goat must have been older than 60, and goats were not very handsome. Cough. Yes ma'am, I am hoping to find the Furious Five. I have heard that they are one of the most well-known and talented martial artists in all of China. True, that may be, but you did not answer me. Why are you wanting to find the Furious Five? I am a martial artist myself and I have traveled all the way from Japan to Dash. If you have come here with the thought that you can join them, then you can head home right now. No, I wish to challenge them to a sparring match, so that I can test myself against other martial artists in different styles. You want to challenge the Furious Five to a fight, she said, her eyes weird and piercing as if they could hear his deepest thoughts. That is not smart. These are not the type of fighters that you would want to challenge with a weak resolve, she continued. If that is all the problem is, then don't worry, my resolve is strong and I have faith in my skills, and do not forget that I simply wish to challenge them to a spar, not an actual fight. What is the difference in a spar and a fight? A spar has certain rules and a limit to how far one can go before the referee calls the spar to an end. A fight differs because instead of the ref, it is up to the 2 warriors to decide how far that they take the fight. Well, if that's all, then I see no problem with telling you, the Furious Five can be found in the Valley of Peace about 2 days' travel from here, she added, as the old goat woman pointed with her hooved wrist toward the east. Naruto thanked the goat woman as he turned to begin the journey to the Valley of Peace, and he believed he heard the elderly woman say something along the lines of, "Poor boy doesn't know what he is getting himself into." Nevertheless, he didn't let this stop him from continuing on his journey, hoping to meet the 5 famous warriors, who were considered to be among the best martial artists in all of China. Fast forward a day and a couple of hours. The friendly pig that was crossing the road at the time of Naruto's last conversation asserted that the bamboo grove he was now passing through was the last thing standing between him and the Valley of Peace. Naruto said, "Hey you, halt," as he turned to confront a tall ox man who was more than 2 heads taller than him. He did not expect this when the pig at the crossroads said that about the last obstacle, but Naruto was not going to let it get to him. Naruto was not going to tremble before the ox man, even though he didn't want to battle him. The ox man would fight if they so desired, and Naruto would prevail. "Yeah, what do you want?" "You better watch your mouth, pipsqueak," You must be new to the area because if you weren't then you would know that we are the residential tax collectors in this area of the forest, and you would also know what happens to those who refuse to pay us. If you expect for me to be scared, then you apparently don't know who you are dealing with. My name is Naruto and I am going to be the best martial artist in the world. Naruto grew angry after being made fun of for a minute and was about to wonder what was so funny when he heard the ox, who had been staring at him with the same blank expression ever before Naruto began mouthing to him, burst out laughing. Naruto turned to see what the ox was so amused by. A herd of oxen appeared out of the bamboo groves, each of them wielding a weapon. Naruto noted that the ox he had been talking to had also pulled his weapon when he turned back to face him. He now wielded a blade that looked like the ones he had seen in Japan, but it was thicker and more curved. He assumed this was a dao. Now, as I was saying, those that refuse to pay us are given the bullpen treatment, and you don't want that, do you? Well, that really depends on whether or not you have got reinforcements hidden in the trees or if these are all that you have got to back you up. The oxen in the clearing looked at one another and then burst out laughing. Unable to find the comedy, Naruto decided to use some of his skills to silence them. Naruto moved quickly and fluidly, putting one foot in front of the hooved feet of the ox, grabbing the first ox's hand, flipping the ox over his head, and slamming him to the ground. After seeing the unidentified warrior's talent demonstration, the other oxen became more determined to pursue Naruto, and they wouldn't allow him to capture them the way he had their friend. Their friend got flipped by a fox that was less than half your size, which briefly shocked him but did not knock him out or anything. To pass past and continue on to the Jade Palace, Naruto simply needed one of them to move against him or to move aside. "So are you going to let me pass or not?" inquired he. Although the other ox might have let him pass, Naruto's overturned ox was not about to let a small fox ruin his reputation. Naruto turned his head slightly and saw the ox, now known as Ox 1, approaching him with his Dao in one, uplifted, and ready to strike. "How dare you try to make a fool of me, ah!" he exclaimed. Naruto held his composure and waited for Ox 1 to come closer before taking a step forward as the blade was ready to drop. Instead of trying to avoid the sword, Naruto caught it with his left paw elevated and rotated a quarter turn clockwise. He grasped the weapon and rotated his paw half a circle counterclockwise, pushing the blade aside and causing Ox 1's arm to bend at an awkward angle. The ox was knocked out of his breath when Naruto, still using his left paw, pushed the sword's hilt up and into his chest. Then Naruto whirled around and backhanded the ox in the face after grabbing the blade with his right paw and releasing it with his left. Ox 1 lost his hold on the sword Naruto was now clutching after the blow's impact sent him sprawling to the ground. "Oh, oof!" Ox 1 cried in agony, but Naruto just used his left paw to stop him. Now that Ox 1 was back on the ground, the other oxen were quite wary of this small but dangerous fox. Before any of them could leave the clearing and hide in the bamboo, Ox 1 had gotten back up and approached Naruto from behind. They had begun to back away from him in the hopes of escaping before he turned his deadly paws on them. Naruto used a cross-arm guard to block the punch as he turned to face Ox 1. Naruto used one arm to block a second punch that Ox 1 threw. Enraged, his opponent got careless, and he was irritated that he was keeping Naruto from achieving his goal, which was so near. The next blow was blocked by Naruto once more, but this time he used the same arm to grip Ox 1's wrist. To avoid dealing with the giant foe again, Naruto quickly spun and exerted some effort to flip Ox 1 again. He then kicked the ox in the face to knock him unconscious. After seeing their leader flung to the ground 3 times in a row, the remaining oxen lost what little courage they still had and began to flee into the woods. Naruto looked down at the blade he was still holding. It wouldn't be wise to abandon this bandit with a sword, would it? After sliding Ox 1 onto his stomach, Naruto removed the sheath from his back and attached it to his own. Now that the distractions had been eliminated, it was time to continue the journey to the Valley of Peace. Fast forward 2 hours. Naruto saw the Valley of Peace at the foot of another hill he had crossed. He will soon get the opportunity to meet and, perhaps, compete against the Furious Five. With his head held high and his new sword strapped to his back, he began a determined descent towards the valley. Entering the Valley of Peace, Naruto was thrilled to see the Jade Palace, home of some of the greatest kung fu masters in China, in front of him. This was the primary reason he had come to China, and nothing, I repeat, could keep him from meeting the Furious Five, therefore he could not wait any longer. Growl. He saw that the majority of the town was made up of pigs, geese, goats, and bunnies while he was strolling along the street looking for ramen, which is his favorite meal at home. Although it makes some sense, the strong defend the weak, after all, these are not the types of individuals who would reside in the same town as the top martial artist in the region. After 10 minutes of looking for something that resembled ramen, he had given up on finding actual ramen after the first 5 individuals he asked claimed to have never heard of it. He had not yet been able to find the famous noodle business that Mizing the goat told him was supposed to be nearby. Noodles, get your fresh hot noodles here, get them while they're hot. He was a skilled martial artist, so who was he to judge, even though this didn't seem like the makings of a fantastic noodle shop. That's convenient, then. I guess the saying, ask and you shall receive, is accurate. Growl. He can either try to get philosophical about a noodle shop before going there and confronting the Furious Five, or he can just go straight to the Jade Palace and ignore about the part about overanalyzing the size and appearance of a noodle shop. There were many customers in the noodle business he had heard about, and most of them seemed irritated by the poor quality of service they were receiving. In addition, he saw a geese at the counter and a panda serving the tables. He proceeded to the counter and decided that he could stand and eat as there were no extra tables available. The geese could eat on the way to the Jade Palace if he didn't mind the bowl. Probably because he was a stranger, he appeared reluctant to answer when he saw the goose watching him. "Excuse me, I was wondering, do you have a bowl that I could take with me, or do I need to eat here?" questioned the man. "I have a set number of cheap bowls that I sell to the customers, but if I may ask, why do you not want to eat at the shop?" "Well, I am actually on my way to the Jade Palace, and I only stopped by because I just realized how hungry I was. However, I am really eager to meet with the Furious Five and challenge them to a spar." Naruto turned to see the panda from earlier standing there with a broken bowl on the ground and his foot standing in the leftover noodles after hearing a faint crash behind him. As he tried to advance, he slid on the noodles and slammed against one of the tables, causing the bowls to rattle. He rose slowly, rubbing his nose, or rather his whole face, before returning to Naruto and the geese. "Are you really planning on fighting the Furious Five? What kung fu do you know? Who taught you? Is that a Nuedo sword? Are you planning on challenging Shifu or Ogwe also?" Pa had been bouncing enthusiastically while he posed his inquiries, even participating in what Naruto had to presume was kung fu. "Pa, calm down please, you are wrecking the shop," was accurate. He bumped into tables and shook the ground when he leaped because of his bulk and unsteady movements. It's polite. I do not use kung fu, I use taijutsu." "Taijutsu? I have never heard of that." "I am not surprised, I was born in Japan, I only recently came to China to gain more experience in fighting different types of martial artists." "Whoa, so you're a foreigner, Well, what do you think of China so far? Well, so far, I've only been traveling for 2 days. Oh, but earlier today I did run into some bandits in the bamboo forest. Actually, that is where I got this sword from, and I don't know what kind of sword it is. At least it was clear from his remark that is awesome, that he was having fun with Naruto. Po was someone Naruto admired as well, and his overly excited demeanor made him think of himself before he had matured. Although Naruto was unable to recognize the panda's aura, he was eager to go and make it to the Jade Palace today. Naruto was ready to put his order when he turned back to face the goose behind the counter. So can I get a bowl of noodles and one of those takeout bowls? Oh, and I don't have any money at the moment, but if you let me I can pay you back later. Sorry, but the Ping Company motto states that no purchases can be made without the money to purchase them, and that loans are not to be filed without a 2-year-long loyal customer deal, and furthermore Ah, come on Dad, he came all the way from Japan to fight the Furious Five. Why don't I vouch for him, and if he doesn't pay you back within a week then I will earn the money to pay the bill. Naruto was surprised that the panda believed in him, especially since they had only just met a minute before. Naruto smiled at the panda's expression of worry and offered to help him with anything he asked for. Judging from the way he behaved when talking about Kung Fu, he knew precisely what he was going to do. Naruto left after stating, "Thank you for the offer, Pa, but I don't want to ask that of you. I will remember the gesture though, and I will find a way to pay you back. And Mr. Ping, the next time that I come here I will have money and buy a big bowl. Actually I am going to buy a bowl for me and Pa." But before he could continue, he called Pa up and said, "When I return I will tell you how the fight with the Furious Five went." He saw that everyone was staring at him as he was leaving. Obviously, they had never seen someone challenge the Furious Five before. Well, that wasn't his issue. The multiple steps he would need to climb were the source of his annoyance. Time leaped 10 minutes later. It is customary to knock or otherwise make an announcement when you are approaching someone else's house, particularly if the door is closed. But bear in mind 3 things. 1. Who you are talking about. Naruto has never been patient. 2. His whole purpose for going to China was right behind the door, 10 feet away. And 3. He never received his noodles or ramen, thus his mind was empty. He remarked, "Well, that was a decent workout. Now where are those Furious Five? I have been very patient, at least for me," as he looked at a large hallway with doors locked. That being stated, are you really surprised that rather of knocking, Naruto leaped over the entrance and began exploring the Jade Palace grounds? He was still wandering aimlessly when a tan figure leaped up and went by below him, sensing an attack from behind. The tan blur turned and raced at Naruto before he hit the ground, but his instincts overcame him before he could identify the potential attacker. After holding Naruto's leg with its tail, the assailant, whom Naruto now identified as a monkey, swung around and tried to hit his back. Naruto lifted one leg and kicked in the direction of his attacker, but his tail deflected the kick effortlessly. Naruto seized the monkey's tail and yanked him back in front of him, drawing on his prior experience battling against opponents that were faster or more nimble. He fired 2 rapid jabs at the monkey's face without stopping, and when he was stopped as expected, he kicked him in the stomach. If it weren't for the crane that swooped down and grabbed the monkey before he hit, his last strike would have connected and sent the animal hurtling to the ground. Naruto landed in a crouched position and watched as the monkey and crane, who had recovered from the kick, also landed. Examining his surroundings closely, Naruto saw another foe, some kind of snake, by his side. He started running up to the buildings, not sure if there was still a hidden enemy out there, hoping that whomever was after him would have to come clean. As he raced, he saw that the 3 were behind him, but there was nobody else in the area. not until he got to the top of the next hill, where he was caught up in a tiger-praying mantis fight that was being watched over by a red panda. With no more words to say, Naruto murmured, "Hello," and turned to leave. Over his shoulder, he heard someone murmur, "Crane, who is that?" but he didn't stop to hear the answer. When all 6 of the warriors suddenly surrounded him, it didn't help that he had figured out who one of his attackers was. 6. Even though he was outnumbered, he could tell that they were approaching him very cautiously. 5 of you wouldn't happen to be the Furious 5, would you? He asked. To be honest, he was a little proud that they thought so highly of him. Naruto had to look at the red panda, the next speaker. Naruto could tell by his demeanor that he did not want to offend this individual. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" He had always hated arrogant people, but this one was worse than the rest. "My name is Naruto and I have come from Japan to ask to fight against the Furious 5. I have heard the stories of how the Furious 5 are some of the best martial artists in all of China, and I would be honored if Growl. Naruto's face started to grow a little hot, but he didn't want to make a negative first impression. His initial perception, however, was that he had engaged in combat with the monkey before embarking on a wild pursuit around the Jade Palace. Their facial expressions suggest that they wouldn't. He bowed his head so much that he was exposing himself. "As I was saying, I would be honored if you would forget what just happened. I would be honored if you would allow me to fight against the famous Furious 5, he said. The red panda was speaking again, and Naruto assumed he was the senior of the others, if not the master. "No, I am sorry, but we do not have time to train another student at the moment," he replied. "I mean no disrespect, but I feel that you may have misheard my request. I merely am asking to have a practice match against the Furious 5, I was not trying to become a student of the temple." The 6 of them were a little surprised to learn that someone had traveled from Japan to China just to spar with someone. Why had he come here, after all, if he was not going to stay? They were probably the Furious 5 he was looking for, since that man was the leader of the others. "Young man, if you were not planning on staying here, then what is the point of traveling all the way here just to challenge my students to a fight? I was just hoping to fight against the 5 so that I could see how strong I was, and if I won then I would move on to another area and fight someone else, but if I lost I was going to stick around the area, and after more training I was going to come back and challenge you again." Seeing their master buried in concentration, the 5 questioned, "You have come here merely to test your strength, that is not the sort of action that I condone. Who is your master, and what have they been teaching you?" But when he looked up, he was speaking to Naruto, not to them. "I never had a master, I have trained myself," was a revelation that caught them all off guard. A warrior who successfully fought back against the Furious 5 was astounding, but even more remarkable was one who did not have any formal instruction. After reviewing the young fox's statement, Shifu remarked, "Okay, you can pick your opponent. Since you just want to see how strong you are, I see nothing wrong with that. You also seem to not know who you are challenging, so allow me to introduce, Tigress, Monkey, Crane, Viper, Mantis, and I am Master Shifu. So choose who you wish to be your opponent," stated Shifu. Naruto began by taking a close look at each of the Furious 5. He had already faced Monkey and found that he avoided and attacked from unusual locations and angles by using speed and adaptability. Because of his large legs that allowed him to reach and his wings that allowed him to fly, Crane would be a more formidable foe. Because of his diminutive stature and extraordinary speed, Mantis was a unique opponent who was challenging to hit and protect against. Viper was a special case as well, mostly because she was the one with the most comparable body type to his, meaning he would have the least amount of fighting experience with her. She had no limbs and a very flexible body. Naruto remarked, "All right, then I decide to fight you," indicating. When he said, "Fine, then I choose to fight you," Naruto pointed straight at Shifu, and the furious five shocked, and occasionally outraged, looks were clear to see. With her hackles nearly raised as she looked at Naruto, Tigress said, "Absolutely not, that was not the agreement," and he could see that the only thing keeping her from attacking or insulting him was her respect for her master. Tigress came within an inch or two of being considered to be in his face. "You asked to spar with one of the five and Master Shifu is not a part of the five," he stated. Naruto let his paw fall with his head when he realized she was correct, but facing the master of the Furious Five would have still been amazing. He was going to select a new opponent when he heard a dull thunk behind him. He saw the five and Shifu bow to someone behind him, so he knew it was someone important. Naruto saw an elderly turtle coming at them as he turned to face the sound. An older turtle with a walking stick and a ribbon around his shell was the source of the thunks he heard. Master Oogway/Master, Naruto was curious about who the old turtle was, but the rest of the group showed him respect. After a brief silence, Shifu and the other members of the Furious Five burst into rage. When they heard Oogway speak, they all stopped talking at once, and he was unable to understand a word they were saying. "Oi, who is the old man?" "Old man? What old man?" he asked, scanning the area for an absent figure. "Oh, you mean Shifu? Well, yes, he is getting a bit older," he answered, and Shifu and the five just looked, unable to react, since if they responded he was talking about Oogway, they would be acknowledging that he was an old man. Naruto was sweating as the old turtle said, "Actually, I was talking about you," but it was funny to see Shifu's face when the turtle called him old. "Oh, well, I am Master Oogway, and I am the master of the Jade Palace. Shifu is one of my students and a very loyal friend of mine." "Apparently I am a very old loyal friend," Shifu said softly. Oogway was staring at Naruto as he responded, waiting for a response. "Now I want to know who is this young fox with the slick tongue and happy attitude," asked Oogway. "My name is Naruto and I came from Japan to train myself against China's finest kung fu experts, and I came here to challenge the Furious Five to a match," Shifu interrupted in a tone of hardly disguised animosity. "But you did not challenge the five, you instead challenged me, just before disrespecting my master." Shifu was on the previous Furious Five, so I think that given our young friend's determination he should be allowed to test himself against Shifu, Oogway joked. Despite Naruto's surprise at Oogway joining him, Shifu and the Furious Five were even more taken aback. They all had the same look of disbelief, and some of them had even fallen silent upon hearing Oogway's claim. Shifu remarked, "Well, then, if my master is on board with this, then I too will give my consent," and began to head for the stairs. "If you still want to challenge me, follow me to the practice field." Eager to start the game, Naruto ran to the practice field before the others did, only to discover that he was lost. In an attempt to determine where the others had vanished to, he had to turn around and sprint back. On one of the lowest floors of the Jade Palace, Naruto saw Shifu surrounded by the Furious Five and Oogway. He positioned himself across from Shifu by dropping down in the middle of them. They looked at one another, waiting for the other to move, but Oogway finally took a step forward after they had stood there for over a minute. "You may begin when ready." The sound of his master's voice prompted Shifu to leap into action, charging at Naruto, who ducked and turned to counterattack, only to feel his arm being grasped. Then he felt as though he was being tossed and jostled back and forth in a flurry of action. At last, he had the impression that he was being flung from the improvised circle that the assembled individuals had created. He hit the ground hard and fought to stand up, but when he did, he turned and charged back at his opponent. Naruto jumped over the heads of Tigress and Crane, saw where Shifu was, and aimed, not wanting to give Shifu any time to prepare. He crouching close behind Shifu, he kicked Shifu in the rear, hoping it would miss, and then he used his hands to push himself out of the way of Shifu's strike. Once he was in position, Naruto pushed his head onto Shifu's bare back while using his legs to propel himself forward. Naruto jumped without flinching and attempted to finish the battle with an axe kick, but was taken aback when Shifu, rather than being sent to the ground, hooked one leg around Naruto's foot and threw himself at Naruto's face. Naruto was caught off guard by Shifu's lightning-fast retaliation and collapsed as a result. Oogway's voice could be heard over the practice field, speaking to the warriors before another round began. "I must say, for one as skilled as this young lad, to have not had a master, it is a shame, a waste of a talented pupil," stated the instructor. The young fox's show of respect for the master of the Jade Palace was not missed by the others. Naruto even tried to make what he thought was a polite bow, but it would have been better if he hadn't waved his hand theatrically. He remarked, "Thank you, Master Oogway." When Oogway responded, "Yes, it has been a long time since I last saw Shifu as hard-pressed as he was against you. I believe that the last person to give him such a tough fight like that was, well, me," he giggled. "That is a great honor coming from you, Master Oogway, and I also thank you, Master Shifu, along with your pupils, for allowing me this opportunity. I hope that the rest of your day goes well," Naruto said before turning and heading back down. "Wait, where are you going?" Master Shifu asked in a tone that was both grave and bewildered. Naruto turned to face the mountain and began to descend, his face betraying his confusion. "Didn't I tell you?" he said. "Now that I have tested myself, I can see the difference between our levels of skill, so I am going to go train and then I will be back to challenge you again," he added. He didn't know where he was going to train, but he was positive he had to find a place close to the city to get the latest information on the Furious Five, such as whether they were on a mission or if any of them were injured. He was almost at the foot of the steps when a gigantic male pig sprinted past him, and if it weren't for his quick reflexes, he might have been knocked down the lower stairs of the mountain. Lost in meditation, he kept walking down the mountain, oblivious to the fact that most of the people were murmuring and pointing at him. When he did notice, he found that the person he was gazing at would either walk away or turn and run into their homes any time he made eye contact. "Excuse you, man, some people are just jerks," he replied. "Wonder what their problem is, whatever, it's got nothing to do with me." When Naruto finally realized what was bothering the villagers, he was on his way to the noodle store to inform Po of what had transpired. There were 2 oxen on either side of the doorway, 4 oxen outside the noodle shop, and a few more within the dining room. The sight of Naruto caused one of the oxen to turn toward the entryway. "Boss! That guy you was looking for, he's here." After a little shifting, the same ox that Naruto had fought in the bamboo grove emerged from the store. Naruto was not concerned about this. Instead, he was concerned about the fact that the ox's right hand was currently grabbing Mr. Ping by the neck. Naruto was actually observing Mr. Ping and trying to figure out a way to liberate him as he was staring at him. "Answer me when I am talking to you, boy," he replied. "Well, look who it is, come to return my sword to me." Naruto reached for the sheath, unbuckled the strap that resembled a belt on his chest, and let the blade and sheath drop to the ground. When the ox ahead of him jerked its head, one of the other oxen rushed to seize the sword. Although Naruto wasn't one to be bossed around, he also wasn't going to allow himself to inflict harm to anyone. Just so you know, I have been waiting for our rematch since you left me in the bamboo forest, and now that I have found you I will not let you get away with insulting the Ox gang. Sorry, I have never heard of your gang, so why don't we just end this little problem right here with neither side getting hurt? You idiot, it is not the Ox gang, it is the Ox named gang. I am gang leader of the Horned Bandits and you are the fool that dared to challenge me to a fight. Because of your idiocy these people will die and I want them all to know that it is because of you that they suffer. After that, Gang took the dao from the other ox and, by holding on to the handle, let gravity remove the sheath from him. After that, he pointed the blade at the crowd gathered around the noodle shop. Let them all feel the wrath of Gang the ox that practices the bronze bull style of fighting. Ooh. You mean the bronze bull, the same style that was used by Grand Master Lon in the fierce battle of the 100 Wolves? Naruto turned his head just enough to observe Panda peering between the two fighters, both of them appearing happy and scared as they waited to see what the panda would do. Yes, Panda, I used the same style as that old fool. Why does that make you even more afraid of the great Gang and his crew of bandits? No. What do you mean no? I use a legendary fighting style that was passed down for many a generation. Why in the world would you not be afraid of me? The battered bodies of all the horned bandits lay at the feet of the Furious Five, who stood behind him. Once the proud head of a successful bandit group, Gang was distracted by the entrance of the Furious Five. Naruto took advantage of this to sneak up behind him and disarm the threat with a strong punch to the temple and a fast choke hold to keep him in place. Panda merely gestured behind Gang, who halted and became a sickly pale when he turned to see what the panda was so sure of. Naruto looked to Panda, who was staring at the Furious Five and busy embracing his father. The funny panda made Naruto grin, and he was sure that if he stayed with Panda, he would never get bored. After taking a month-long vacation from the Valley of Peace, Naruto stood and amazed at the amount of work he had accomplished. He was fortunate enough to swiftly double the reward money he had earned for that ox, Chuchin Dash, or whatever his name was, in one of the gaming halls in the Valley of Peace. He was even more fortunate to visit 3 more halls, and by the time he finished, he had collected more than 1,200 yuan. In order to provide Naruto a rough ground plot that was around 16,000 square feet, he went to a farmer and offered to buy a plot of land from him. The farmer was delighted to receive the money, due to bandit trouble, which he cleverly failed to disclose to Naruto, at that point. Naruto knew it was more like 1/3 of an acre, even if the farmer said it was half an acre, but he didn't want to create a quarrel about the property. He took the robbers to the farmer's land, sarcastically chuckled as they departed, then dealt with them by beating the living daylights out of them and warned them not to come back to his property. He wouldn't get even just because he didn't want to quarrel with the farmer over a little piece of land. He looked about the small house he had built. It was nothing substantial, but it would keep him warm and shield him from the elements. He had left a few little holes in the home to give it a more organic appearance, and he had planted some of the plentiful bamboo that surrounded it into these holes. He would eventually have a bamboo wall enclosing his home as the bamboo grew and became a part of the structure. Additionally, he had been trying to establish a garden but had failed thus far. The earth was so harsh and dry that he doubted anything would ever grow there. He had even dug up the earth by hand for the past 3 days, discarding any big stones he came across. Using a river or stream to direct the water's flow over the land for 2 days, making sure the ground was totally drenched, then rerouting the water's flow away from the ground and allowing it dry, is the only other method he hasn't tried yet. To make sure the ground was absorbing the water and allowing it to dry out so it wouldn't turn into a swamp, he would need to repeat this procedure for at least 2 weeks. In order to persuade the farmer into giving him some land with a water source, he made the decision to begin his morning workout before the sun rose. He entered the house and searched until he located his Dao blade, which he had given the name Jinburo to symbolize the events that transpired when he stole this exquisite silver blade from a dishonest bull. He walked out the back door with his sword in hand and began to rehearse his sword poses. He had attempted, but failed, to integrate his sword talents with his hand-to-hand abilities. While he could use the sword and fight hand-to-hand, he could even do both at the same time, but he was not able to truly incorporate the sword into his style. It was like trying to eat soup off of a plate. While it can be done, it is not the correct way to do it. Naruto was trying to make a bowl, but all he was getting was plates. Continuing his sword stances until almost an hour had passed, he sheathed the blade and leaned it against the back of the house before finding his leg weights and strapping them to legs. One of the other things that he had worked on during the month of isolation was his leg weights. They were a simple design. 2 large stones were found and Naruto crafted them for him to wear. He split the stone into 4 pieces, smoothed them out until they were the correct size, and then he took 2 and strapped them to his left leg before he did the same to his right. The weights were about 4 inches of stone, weighing close to 30 pounds each piece, and he would wear these as he began his daily 3-mile run. After he got used to the added weight of the stones, he added bags to them and began to fill them with either rocks or sand to help weigh him down. He would purchase some of the professional equipment he had observed, mostly from the visit of the Jade Palace after the ox incident, when he was in a more secure financial position. The weighted boots and gloves that Master Shifu had shown him were the primary item he desired. He wouldn't refuse their training hall, of course, but he had other plans than to daydream about what he could do in such a facility, so he began his daily exercises in the morning. When Naruto learned he had no water source nearby, he frowned. 3 hours later, he was sweating, panting, and in desperate need of a bath. With a groan, he set off for the tiny lake he had found a few weeks earlier. He wouldn't mind if it wasn't just a little over a mile from his house, but it was, and he did. He began organizing his daily schedule. He would usually train so that he would defeat Shifu when he returned, but he would stay around the town for a bit and wait for any kind of reward that might come up. He was known to the majority of the villagers as the hunting fox or something like. He was only acting to get money for food and other essentials, not to build a reputation. He was just removing his shirt as he got to the lake when he heard a sound coming from behind him. He ran into a grove of bamboo and waited to see who was after him. He heard voices a few seconds later, and then he spotted 2 young pigs coming toward the hamlet, squealing with excitement about something. Naruto was left to his thoughts as they sped back to the village, babbling back and forth. Yes. Yes. The poster said that Master Ogwe was going to choose the Dragon Warrior today. We must hurry to the Jade Palace or we will miss the event of the century, possibly the millennium. Although it's intriguing that one of the 5 will transform into the Dragon Warrior, I'm interested in Ogwe's reasoning for selecting the Dragon Warrior at this specific time. For whatever reason, he has decided it's time to choose the Dragon Warrior, and I'm sure it was a wise choice. More importantly, I have to move fast to avoid missing the Dragon Warrior selection, but I wonder which of the 5 will be chosen. He hastily stripped off his clothing and bathed himself so he wouldn't miss the Dragon Warrior pick. In 2 minutes, he was in and out of the lake. He put his clothes back on and hurried toward the village in what, in Kung Fu's view, was the most important ceremonial event in all of China. He soon noticed everyone hurrying to the steps of the Jade Palace as he passed by the outer neighborhoods of the hamlet. Naruto would have turned around to assist his friend Pa if he had noticed him having trouble pushing the cart, and the 2 of them would have made it to the event safely. Thankfully, Po would have to confront the difficulty of ascending the steps by himself, which would ultimately bring him to his fate. Not a second after he jumped onto the first roof, a panda in an apron was spotted turning the corner, indicating that he had made the very lucky decision to go along the rooftops rather than the swarming street. Like everyone else there, Naruto wasted no time in mounting the steps that led to the Jade Palace after arriving at their base. When he arrived to the summit, he quickly looked for a place to sit and bide his time until the event began, which was 30 minutes later. It was incredible, with golden dragons, different training methods, including, and possibly torture, and equipment being moved and arranged so the Furious Five could demonstrate their abilities. Master Shifu entered the temporary stage at the beginning of the event and presented the Furious Five, who dazzled the crowd with a sophisticated display of stances and maneuvers. First came Crane, then Mantis, Monkey, Viper, and Tigress. But when it was Tigress's turn, Oogway motioned for the audience to halt their conversation and for the five to assemble before him. The black and white missile was practically shooting into the air above them, but Naruto was unaware of it because he was keeping a tight eye on Oogway. Oogway was about to point to one of the five when something fell right in front of them. The cloud of dust it produced blocked out everyone's vision, but Naruto caught a glimpse of it and felt his face fur turn pale. Fearing for his friend's well-being, he stood up and attempted to move to the spot where the five were huddled over his panda companion, but he was repeatedly pushed back by everyone attempting to see what had fallen. He heard the words that increased his concern for his friend's health as he finally reached the edge of the stands. Everyone in the stands could clearly hear Oogway say, "The universe has brought us our dragon warrior," despite his low, croaking voice. This was the unwritten signal for some pigs to come and help transport the panda away, and what followed was complete chaos. Well, not really, as Po was taken away in a decorative palanquin that had been hoisted by ducks before falling through. Naruto was ready to follow when he heard Shifu telling Master Oogway that Po was a fat panda and that he could not be the dragon warrior. Shifu was planning to point at Tigress when the panda fell in front of her. Naruto was about to confront Shifu after being disturbed by his comments regarding his friend when he became aware of another thing. Naruto looked at the Furious Five and saw that Tigress had her eyes closed and her head bent when Shifu spoke. He decided to try to cheer Tigress up in the only manner he knew how, deciding that speaking to Oogway could wait. Tigress slid down the staff until her butt was on the ground when Master Oogway stabbed the ground, ending her brief flight. After jumping out of the stands and sprinting towards the Furious Five, Naruto struck her back with a strong flying kick that connected and sent her hurtling toward Oogway. Naruto was about to shout a warning when Oogway stabbed the end of his staff into the ground after it had twirled around and snagged beneath Tigress' blouse. Oogway said, "Well, my child," as he took the staff off of Tigress' shirt. "I do believe that you have been issued a challenge and it would be rude to ignore such an enthusiastic request." Tigress looked up and met Naruto's eyes, and Naruto started to regret his rash choice to greet him with a flying kick. When Naruto saw who had attacked her, Tigress's eyes widened, but they soon narrowed, and before he could do more than turn and flee, she was running at him. Now, this is not your fight, our fox friend wants to spar against Tigress, why don't the rest of us go and prepare to greet our new dragon warrior?" The other members of the Furious Five dropped their ready postures and followed Oogway and an irate Shifu up to the Jade Palace when Naruto heard what Oogway had to say. He couldn't help but smile when he heard the irate Tigress behind him roar and felt the tip of his tail move from the wind created by her claw swipe, even though he knew that Oogway had taken care of the other Furious Five for him so that he could try to help Tigress without being interrupted. He focused all of his concentration on running and attempting to locate an isolated area where he and Tigress could fight, since he didn't want to be battered half to death, and he was saying half to be hopeful. He had no other plans, and, moaning as he thought about the damage that would surely come from this decision, he began to walk in the direction of his recently finished house. He began shouting over his shoulder, first so she could follow his voice and then so she would begin speaking to him, not wanting to lose Tigress in the thick bamboo jungle. "Hey, is there any chance that we can just stop and talk this out?" Of course there is, but if I were you I wouldn't take that risk. Right, that is some good advice. Have you ever thought of becoming a guidance counselor? No, T said. Well, it is just as well. I doubt you could do anything if it wasn't kung fu related. You make that sound like it is a bad thing, T. Not so much a bad thing, but it is limiting. Naruto turned suddenly, half expecting Tigress to catch up with him and half wishing he would lose her. After a minute, he prayed that she would stay with him because of her eyes, not because he wanted to fight her. Her eyes were the eyes of a broken warrior, and like a broken weapon, they needed to be repaired or repurposed. He had seen that sight numerous times after seeing someone lose a battle, but now he saw them gleaming with the will to fight and the urge to pursue. Luckily for her, his house was less than 30 seconds away. They just had to make a small detour to the left, then turn sharply right at that strange tree, move over that small hill, and turn left. At the top of the hill, Naruto stopped to consider what he was seeing. The bamboo he had set up for shade on the side of the house had been burned and probably used in the fire, and what looked like clubs and axes had damaged his yard. He had recently finished his house, which was now in ruins due to the fire. To exacerbate the situation, Tigress chose that same moment to take her retribution. Naruto landed on the edge of the clearing that delineated his yard after tumbling down the tiny incline, and he lay there for a moment reflecting on all the effort that had now been in vain. He thought he had better check the house to see if anything could be salvaged before it fell beneath the weight of the flames, so he got up. Naruto turned around and spotted some of the bandits he had already defeated, including the ox, crocodile, and talking pig. "Well, look who made it for the fireworks," he said. A rhino and a gorilla were the new group members. They all had weapons of some sort, and Naruto saw that his sword, the only truly important object in his home except his weights, had been taken by the ox. He was searching for any gaps or vulnerabilities in his opponents as he dropped into a ready stance. "And look, he brought his girlfriend so she could witness our revenge," Naruto remarked as she stood beside him. It was rude of her to say that being his girlfriend was an insult. She didn't need to. "I was going to go easy on you, but after an insult like that I will just try to make sure that you are not accidentally killed," Tigress stated, while Naruto sulked beside her. "Yeah, well, I wouldn't want you to be my girlfriend anyway," was Naruto's rambling reply. Tigress didn't seem to believe him or care, judging by her silence. That the bandits had lost their sole hope of surrendering was probably due to the lusty tone of the rhino, which made it obvious to both of them what he was indicating. "Well, if you don't want her," the rhino responded, draping a black blanket over his horn. "We will be happy to take her off your hands and put her on ours." "Hey Tigress," Naruto began, turning his head slightly to face her. "There are only 5 of them, so what do you say to a little game? Whoever gets the most out of the other 4 gets the gorilla." "Fine, but don't complain since this was your idea," Tigress replied, turning to look at him. But she resorted to the bandits when he began to pout and accuse her of being cruel. Although Naruto never professed to be an honorable fighter, he only does what is necessary to survive. It was not a noble intention. In order to close the gap between himself and the pig, Naruto entered his guard and punched him in the stomach, sending him flying a few yards. He would first target one of the weaker gorillas if he wished to capture it, leaving the stronger underlings for Tigress to take down once she had partly exhausted them. The ox and croc were knocked away from Naruto the following second, and Tigress was flipping the rhino, so the other bandits mistakenly focused on Naruto when they discovered they were being assaulted. Although the pig wasn't a very formidable foe, he had to exercise caution or risk losing an arm because he was using two axes. With the other hand holding the bamboo, Naruto pushed himself up and flipped in midair to get back on his feet after grabbing one of the bamboo rods that were resting on the ground. Seeing that the croc was attacking from behind, he dove under its tail and, keeping both hands on the ground, kicked the croc in the stomach with a strong mule kick. He caught a glimpse of Tigress using his claws to battle the rhino out of the corner of his eye, but his main focus was on the ox aiming a crossbow at the tiger's back. He whirled once, hurling the bamboo like a spear toward the ox, and saw the improvised projectile slide past the ranged weapon's head, shattering the arms of the crossbow as it descended and was halted by the hoofs of the ox. Before he drew Jinburo and was prepared to fight again, the ox dropped the crossbow and began massaging his aching hooves. Naruto was going to step in, but the Nara-covered pig and croc circled him. Naruto simply leaned back to avoid the strike, but the croc quickly charged at him. Naruto then grabbed the outstretched arm and threw the croc toward the ox. The pig then raised its axes, ready to chop off any part of them that it could, and Naruto turned to face it. When the first two strokes hit him, Naruto rolled and dove, but when the next two struck, he moved forward and grasped the handles right below the head of the axe. After a brief struggle against Naruto's stronger hold, Naruto released the grips and delivered a spinning roundhouse kick to the pig's face. He was treated to the spectacle of Tigress delivering a double palm strike to the rhino, which sent him flying into one of the many stones that rose from the ground, while he looked back to see the ox and croc upright. Naruto did not want to get behind the tiger and rushed at the ox and croc, hoping to take them down swiftly, leaving only the pig, which would result in a tie, but Tigress was not going to let him have it that easy. When he made the first strike against the ox, Tigress was making hers against the croc, who was now wielding a hammer. Naruto grabbed the ox and threw him into the air before jumping after him and delivering 3 kicks, much like one would do to a ball to keep it from touching the ground, before delivering a powerful drop kick to the horned head of the ox, sending him soaring to the ground. Not waiting for Tigress to finish up, he ran at the pig, who was standing, although slightly wobbly, and copying Tigress's move but adding a little of his own personal touch. He ran at the pig full speed, and when he was 10 feet away from him, he jumped into the air and began to spin. As he came down from his jump, he stuck his paws out in a double palm strike and hit the pig in the gut, sending him flying. And he was able to safely land on his feet after that newly made move. And he would have looked awesome if he hadn't been stumbling around after all that spinning, attempting to keep his equilibrium. After getting his bearings, he looked back at Tigress and saw that she had not only completed her battle but was standing in front of the gorilla. Naruto quickly moved to stand by her and adopt his own attitude, since he didn't want to be left behind. A gentle clapping sound permeated the room as he was going to warn Tigress that she was trying to steal the good battle. It was impossible to tell which voice was that of the gorilla because his lips were not moving. "You have taken out all of my best men with the exception of Lu Wei here, so let's see if you have the skill to face me," the voice stated. When the voice said, "Well done, you two truly are kung fu masters." As he stretched his senses in an attempt to find this new foe, Naruto kept his eyes on the gorilla. "That is very kind of you to say, but I actually use taijutsu, so I am not really a kung fu master. And where are you, by the way?" "Right in front of you, of course." Lu Wei stepped to the side for me. There was a small bunny behind the large gorilla, which stood up on its knuckles and took a great step to the right. The bunny was clothed like the other bunnies in the town and was likely only a few years younger than Shifu. The two small swords on his belt were the only thing that set him out. They were true miniature swords, not knives, thus he most likely had them manufactured expressly for him and understood how to utilize them. Lu Wei stepped up as though under some unwritten order. "My name is Zhang, and you fox have been a pain in my underling's side, so you have been a pain in my side. I don't know about you, but when I have a pain, I do what I can to rid myself of it," Lu Wei stated. Tigress took her stance while Naruto was still studying Lu Wei, but Lu Wei didn't seem to notice. "There is no need for you to die, young tiger, the only one that I am having a problem with today is the fox," Lu Wei said. Naruto was worried about the fight he would have after the battle with the final two bandits because he had been in the village for a long time and he could remember her jokes so few that he didn't think he would need more than one hand to count them. She added, "Well, so do I, and I am not willing to let someone else fight my battles for me," but he couldn't tell she was teasing because of how serious her face was. "If that is your wish, then the both of you can go to hell together. Lu Wei, kill them." Lu Wei carried out the command without hesitation, lunging forward to attempt to crush them both with a single, powerful swing of his large palm. He turned to face Naruto, the person Zhang truly wanted dead anyhow, after both of his targets had escaped. He tried to punch him, but before his fist could reach him, Tigress struck him with a double palm to the side, altering its trajectory and preventing it from hitting Naruto. He turned to Tigress and replied, "I am not going to say thank you," almost thinking he saw a smile on her face. "You're welcome," he said. "No, I said that I am not going to thank, forget it," but had to stop when the gorilla almost gave him a powerful mule kick to the chest. After racing at the gorilla and ducking under one of its arm swipes, he jumped up to kick Lu Wei in the face, but the gorilla's forearm blocked the blow. The gorilla's other arm pivoted and hit Naruto, knocking him to the ground. However, he recovered from his dizziness in time to see a hand-shaped foot poised to step on his face. Just before the foot hit the floor, he rolled out of the path and let out a small shriek of surprise and fear. Naruto jumped up and faced Tigress, who, like him, was analyzing Lu Wei's motions and trying to come up with a counter-movement. Naruto was waiting for Tigress to initiate this time when he noticed Lu Wei crouched just before the big gorilla rushed towards them. Since Lu Wei stopped as soon as they were in the air and grabbed a handful of dirt and stones, which he then tossed at the two of them, it seemed that their enemy intended Tigress and Naruto to jump out of the way since they were both too quick. In an effort to minimize his target size, Naruto crouched down into a ball as he had nowhere else to go. To his right, he could see Tigress avoiding the biggest of the flying bullets while whirling in midair. Upon landing, both of them sustained minor cuts and scrapes, but their attention was diverted by the gorilla's smile rather than their wounds. "Hey Tigress," Naruto said, looking at the huge, strong, and hairy monster. "What? Are you as tired of him as I am?" "Well, I am more tired of him than I am of you, at the moment." "That's good enough for me, let's take him down." When Lu Wei took his posture, the three of them surged forward, followed by Tigress and Naruto. A series of punches and flips ensued, and Lu Wei was knocked to the ground at the end of the short dispute. Because Naruto had quickly mimicked Tigress's movement, he was now ready to attempt fighting in sync with Tigress as they stood side by side in the same position. "Lu Wei, don't let me down," the small rabbit said from the sidelines. Naruto looked at him and saw that he was calm even though his biggest combatant was on the ground. Naruto felt a little concerned about this, but his biggest concern, both physically and figuratively, was the gorilla that was starting to stand up until the rabbit hurt him or Tigress. When Naruto saw that Tigress was just as keen to put an end to the fight as he was, he made the decision to try a new move he had previously learnt. Tigress was right behind him as he hurried toward Lu Wei. He let her take the lead and ran right behind her as she shifted to stand behind him. Naruto jumped up and lunged for the face as Tigress attempted to kick him in the legs, but his kick was deflected once more. He then looked down to see that Tigress had also been blocked. But things were different this time. Naruto grabbed the other arm because Tigress was blocking his use of it, swung around, and used the momentum to deliver a forceful roundhouse kick to the gorilla's naked face. Tigress hit the gorilla in the knee after Naruto hit him in the face, knocking him to the ground. While still in the air, Naruto glanced down to see Tigress standing beneath the gorilla and yelling at her. After he had described his plan to her, she nodded curtly and got ready. Naruto aimed his paw for the top of the gorilla's head as he began to fall, but Tigress was underneath him and sprung up to hit his chin with a strong rising palm punch. Both attacks struck simultaneously, forcing the gorilla to bear the facial battering on both ends. For a moment, Lu Wei stood there looking at Naruto and Tigress, who thought they would have to keep fighting. The cruel giant then collapsed to the ground, his nose shattered and bloodied, but before any of them could collect themselves, the rabbit master Zhang tossed them aside. "It appears that I will have to take on this task myself," he said, assuming his stance and waiting for Tigress and Naruto to right themselves before launching himself at them again. That was all he and Tigress could say when the little kung fu master hit them, and the blood and bruises that poured from their bodies showed that despite his diminutive size, his fists were a powerful weapon. They had both failed to hit the speedy rabbit at least once, and it was certainly not for lack of effort. They had each attempted to defeat him on their own before attempting to do so jointly with no better result. Given his speed, it seemed reasonable that the rabbit would always parry their blows or kicks with his own punch, but Zhang couldn't figure out why the impact didn't knock him to the ground. Furthermore, he had been hurt more by the small master's blows than by opponents twice his size, not to mention the little rabbit's size. "Come now," Zhang replied, "if you do not do better than this I may have to end this and move on towards the Jade Palace and my old friend Shifu." Tigress positioned herself midway between a kneeling and a sprinting stance and asked, "You know Master Shifu?" He could relate to her desire to rest while Zhang was talking, but neither of them wanted to be caught off guard by the upcoming assault. Even though he was sitting all the time, he was ready to throw himself backwards with his tail if the nimble rabbit charged at him. "Oh yes, admittedly it was close to 40 years ago, but I was an associate of Shifu's," he replied, turning around as though he were an old guy telling his grandchildren a story. He could see that Tigress was beginning to get scarred after learning that her opponent was stronger than her master. "We used to train together, and back then I was always superior when it came to the physical aspect of kung fu. I will say that he had a talent for understanding the mechanics of kung fu," he said. He began with a wide smile that would give the two persons in front of him an air of confidence. "That was 40 years ago, and I doubt that you and Shifu are anywhere near the same level anymore," he said. "Oh," Zhang replied, and it seemed for a second that his remark about the rabbit had no impact. But a second later, he saw the rabbit dart toward him and then farther away. Zhang stated, "If you two are the best that Shifu has to offer, then I do not believe that Shifu will be too much of an issue," in reference to the rabbit being struck in the face by the deceitfully weak bunny's fist. Tigress's charge was useless against Zhang's superior speed, but she seemed unable to stand the bunny master taunting her master in front of her. Zhang jumped and hit the tiger's stomach, forcing her to lose all forward speed and instead begin shooting upwards, while he had only a simple duck to let Tigress soar past him. Then Zhang jumped after her and threw a spinning punch that slammed into her jaw, launching her into Naruto. Naruto worriedly asked, "Tigress Pant, are you Pant all right?" as he gazed at the still tiger at his feet. He wanted to help her, but he knew that doing anything that would expose him to the mini-master would be suicide. "Come on Tigress, answer me," he said. The defeated kung fu fighter said, "He just caught me off guard," in a low voice that was obviously in pain. "I'm fine," he acknowledged. "Well, stay down and rest for the time being, but let me ask you about something that I just saw," he said, glancing sideways at Tigress, who was trying to stand up despite the vertigo that must be racing through her head. "Did you notice that when he attacks, he never uses his feet, he is only using his paws, and on top of that he is only punching? Even in that last move when he jumped after you into the air, it would have been obvious that a kick would have done more damage dash," he mentioned. "He did enough damage." Tigress looked at him after she had finally regained her bearings. Normally, the target would have flinched in fright, but instead he chuckled at her. He spoke in a whisper at first, but as he added more logic and optimism to the issue, he found himself raising his voice with every sentence. "The point is, I don't think that he can perform a strong kick, or at least not as strong as his punches, and that means that there is a method to his punch and it is not just brute strength. If we can find the trick behind the punch, then we can stop it, and his one good trick is beaten," he stated. Tigress turned her head away from him after staring at him with a startled expression that turned into a small smile that he barely noticed. "I must admit, I thought you were nothing more than an idiot that could take a punch. I never suspected that you were hiding a brain in that head of yours," she said. "Well, I had to put it somewhere," the two orange-furred warriors remarked, standing next to each other. Their predatory glares and vulpine smiles suggested that they were both ready for the next round. As he began to move steadily and evenly toward them, Zhang questioned, "So you think that there is a trick to my punches?" "Well, in a way you are correct. I learned a method to make my punches hit harder and deal more damage. I will be happy to supply you with the punches for you to examine if you want to try and figure out the technique," he said. Naruto felt Zhang could just move out of the path before correcting himself and rerouting his charge at Tigress, but he was ready to counter Zhang's rush with his own. Naruto stopped himself by dragging his hand through the ground and hurling the pebbles and mud he was holding with all of his strength toward Tigress's location, because he didn't want the already injured tiger to have to absorb another blow so quickly. In any case, Naruto's projectile attack struck and the rabbit's charge failed because Zhang was either too quick to respond in time or was so confident of his speed that he did not fear an attack. "And that is the first of many hits that you will experience while fighting against me," Naruto said to him. All he had to do was take back control of the situation so Tigress could rest a bit longer and maybe figure out his punching technique. Punches. Constructing a hypothesis, Naruto began to charge at the rabbit again, hoping that the abruptness of his move would draw Zhang's attention again. And it did, as Zhang immediately sprinted toward Naruto's charging form and turned away from Tigress. He kept his eyes on the rapidly moving foe and braced himself to take one of those crushing blows, hoping to take advantage of the moment to deliver a good blow. Zhang appeared to have been holding back until the last 20 feet of the dash, but he abruptly moved from a few yards to a yard in front of Naruto's face. His training kept him strong and enabled him to execute the plan in spite of his innate propensity to stop. Despite his best efforts to brace himself, the pain and the explanation for why Zhang's blows could inflict so much damage in a single strike continued. He had positioned his left side to face Zhang, shielding his right side, so that the specifics would remain confidential for the time being. Then he stretched out to Zhang with his still strong right hand, and instead of hitting him or trying to seize him, he did something Zhang would never have expected. "That is the second hit," Naruto declared, still grinning broadly as he drew back his left hand, prepared to deliver his finest punch, and grasped the rabbit's delicate snout in his strong fist. Naruto smiled and pinched the rabbit's pink nose. "Honk," he said. Zhang stared down at the rabbit's nose and then back up at Naruto with the funniest expression on his face. Naruto had to suppress his amusement as he replied, "You will beg for death and it will come for you slowly and painfully, and as you look back at your life I want you to remember these words." Zhang yelled, "I will kill you for this, you bastard," due to his closed airway. "Shut up," Naruto muttered, letting his fist down and aiming it at Zhang's stomach, hoping to temporarily knock him out. "And let's see if you can take a hit." Smack. Zhang teased, "Ha, is that all you have?" when Naruto's two paws blocked his strike. "After all that bluster, I honestly thought that you would have at least been able to throw a decent punch. Let's see if you can take a hit." "Well, I think we know the answer, ha ha ha," Zhang added. When Naruto asked, Zhang stopped laughing and gave him a puzzled look while keeping his broad smile. "Who said that the hit had been thrown yet?" Wham! Gag! Tigress's kick to Zhang's side had knocked him away, and even though he concentrated on Naruto and used both paws, he was unable to block any of the harm caused by the tiger's attack. As he had been doing to Tigress and Naruto, Zhang was launched into the air, but he persisted until he slammed through some of the bamboo that encircled their dueling grounds because Zhang was so light and Tigress and Naruto both had weight to aid stop their flight. Even though he had collapsed on the ground, clutching his left side following Zhang's last hit, Naruto said, "That was a very nice kick, I would definitely give it an 8 out of 10, with his goofy smile still intact." "I know that I will regret asking, but why only 8, Tigress said, observing the broken bamboo that Zhang had been thrown through. Naruto glanced up at Tigress, who remained splayed on the ground. "You had the opportunity to do a spin kick and didn't take it. You saw how I could have punched him, but I saw that I had a once-in-a-lifetime chance to distract an enemy by grabbing their nose and I took it," said Naruto. Naruto laughed as he listened to Tigress disparage him. "So I lost 2 points for not being an idiot like you. I will keep my 8 then," he replied. If he did, he would act like Shifu, which made him tremble, but he didn't really care what people thought of him. "Hey," Naruto said solemnly for a minute while maintaining the same gaze that Tigress was maintaining. He said, "We did win, right?" "I am not sure," Tigress said, although he knew she believed otherwise. Zhang had been one of Master Shifu's sparring partners before, so she was skeptical of her ability even though he couldn't stop the perfectly executed kick. Tigress reached down to offer Naruto her paw as he was on his hands and knees. After Tigress kicked him, Naruto clutched his already injured left side and exclaimed, "Thank you, Tigress." "What the hell, Tigress?" before getting back up. "Well, before he gets back up, why don't we start heading back to the Jade Palace," he replied. "Did you really think that I had forgotten that stunt you pulled back at the Jade Palace?" she said as he stopped rubbing his sore side and looked at her blankly. Naruto complained, "You already kicked me though. Plus, what kind of warrior are you that would attack an injured man?" as he kept massaging his aching spot. "A woman scorned," Tigress said, looking again at the bamboo for signs of the bunny she had booted into it. "I would not have thought of you as being the one with a sense of humor, but I still think that it was a cheap shot," Naruto started to say as he made another attempt to sit up. Tigress turned away from the bamboo and glared at Naruto as she remembered the details of what he had done to her after Po was crowned the Dragon Warrior. "You're right, Next time I will wait until your back is turned and then kick you into your master's master, in a large crowd that for the most part literally consisted of the entire town, she said. This time, Naruto was hesitant to accept her paw, but he did so because it was getting darker, his side pain was not getting better, and he knew that Zhang could come wandering out of the bamboo thicket at any time. When we both get some rest I will make sure that I get my full vengeance, and this time we will not have to deal with the annoying bandits. After passing the still invalid bandits, Naruto bent down and picked up Jinburo as they began to return along the route he and Naruto had walked from the town to his house. The robber who had fallen on the ox must have been able to partially block the blade, which was in decent shape despite minor damage to the handle. He chose not to worry about it for the moment because the damage was small and would be easy to repair. Despite small scratches on his arms and back and blood running down the side of his face, the young kung fu master seemed to be uninjured. The rabbit, wiping the dust from his shirt, was silently exiting the bamboo forest, but neither of them noticed it. I will let the two of you live for the time being. I need to be at full strength to take down Shifu, and the two of you surprised me, the little rabbit thought as he watched the two injured warriors return to the Jade Palace. But once I am back at 100% I will not be as forgiving as I was today, and then the whole valley will feel my wrath.